Hello everybody, welcome to Mars Mixing Madness. Today I want to talk about buses and groups and when to use them. Because as you can see, we have a project over here and there's a lot of different smaller groups in here, but there's also some nice big categories in here. And then at the top we have our mixing buses. And as you can see, at the moment I currently have 2, but I might end up with a few more, depending on what the mix is going to need, because I'm still in the draft mix stages. But what I want to talk about today is a little bit of the usage of these kind of buses over here, what you're going to do on a mix bus where everything is going to sum together, what you're going to do on a pre-mix, which in this case is just the last 4 of these groups summed together before they go into this mix bus. So all 4 of these, actually all 5 of these are going to go into this bus over here, and then these 2 join them in the mix bus, which means that everything sums together in the mix bus. And as you can imagine, it is really nice having this kind of stuff for organizational purposes. Just having a place where everything sums together allows you to maybe put an analyzer on there, or maybe just do some global volume balancing if you ever need to do something like that. But what I found is that it's also nice to have for example, a temporary master on there, and to kind of see what the mix is going to do once it gets mastered, kind of see how a mix is going to react to being mastered. Because you can of course find that all of a sudden when your track with the way that you have mixed it now is going into a mastering limiter, all of the drums get squashed or all of the detail is lost in a certain synth sound or something like that. And then you can still adapt it before you go into your actual final master. Now I know what you guys are going to say, well, there you have the guy that is going to ask for a subscription and a like and all of that stuff. And yes, that is technically true, but did you know that you can also become a channel member now? I've decided to make some changes around the channel. I mainly wanted to combat the copyright claims that I'm getting on the live stream, so I've decided to put those behind members only. And hopefully that lessens the copyright claims that I'm getting on the feedback streams a little bit. Of course, other benefits include getting priority in feedback streams if you become a member. Some tiers get early access to content, and there's a whole bunch more stuff. I will just pop it up on the screen and then you can check it out a little bit. But if that's something that you're interested in, then hit the join button down below. Now let's get back into the video. Now what I'm doing specifically in this project is a little bit of sidechain ducking. I noticed that in this particular mix, right from the get-go, the kick had a little bit of trouble getting its transient through all of the different elements. And really that was kind of a global problem, so the way that I decided to resolve that is with this kind of pre-mix bus, where just everything that needs a little bit of sidechaining, all of my sequences, all of my one-shots, all of the pads, all of the different effects, and all of the vocals, are going through this track over here, which is where the sidechaining is loaded. And to quickly show you the routing matrix for this stuff, I can go over here. I can just open this up to see that you just set all of the tracks to go through the mix bus, and then you set the mix bus itself to go through this mix bus over here. So this is our pre-mix, which is this one, where all of the different folders are going to, and of course all of the folders hold within them all of the different sequence tracks, and they are all routed to the folder itself. And then from all of the folders, as I said, they go through the sidechaining and then they sum together after the sidechaining into the mix bus itself. Now sidechaining is a very common use of these kind of things because it tends to be the case that it's really kind of a global thing. Either a track really needs a lot of sidechaining for the mix to really work, for that kick to be out of it enough that it stands out enough.
What?
And yes, sometimes that is 1 or 2 elements, but I found that usually it happens to be more a problem with the kick drum. Because when it comes to my actual sequences, I don't do any like big creative sidechaining on there. It's not like other forms of dance music where we're really ducking away from the transient with like heavy sidechaining, something that you would use, for example, LFO tool for or Shaper Box for. And as you can see, in this case, I'm just achieving 2 dB of volume reduction here. So you can imagine that this effect of sidechaining is very, very small. Another effect which is very common on these kind of buses and groups is a little bit of glue processing. And the best way I can describe that is that you're taking all of the different elements and using them together to trigger one individual compressor so that they're reacting to basically the sum of all of the different elements and kind of pushing one element into the other element volume-wise. So you can imagine that on the sequences, this compressor really starts doing most of its stuff when the main sequences are playing over here and over here. And what you can see with these big plugs, these really trigger the compression pretty heavily. They're the ones that go up to 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction, which is actually pretty heavy for glue compression. But what you'll notice in that is that all of the squelches and everything else, they get ducked with that. So they're kind of automatically getting out of the way of the major sound that is also in itself triggering the compression. And this really is the kind of famous effect that you're going to get out of gluing compression, is this ducking of all of the elements towards the compressor, meaning that very loud elements are going to also duck very quiet elements out of the way. And that is going to make a sound a little bit more uniform, because of course dynamically they're going to be all squashed together. So all of these buses, all of these little different things, even the mix bus to a certain extent, these are all part of, say, the organization and all of the summing down of all of the different elements. But I would say that the last category that I kind of have really aren't. This is more organization and generally just treating multiple layered elements as one element. As you can see over here, we have a bunch of different grid synths and we have a bunch of different sequences. And really what I'm trying to do is just treat those as one individual element. Like, I'm not really interested in EQing each of these individual elements over here if I can just slap an EQ over here and achieve everything that I want with this individual EQ band. And that means that within these groups, I'm usually just setting volumes, and maybe, yes, sometimes you need to EQ 1 or 2 individual elements, but most of the actual processing and most of the decision making of the actual mix is going to come on this group here. And this is just one of the simplest ways that you can kind of reduce your workload within an actual mix. And that is to a certain extent also what you're doing by grouping everything together as sequences and then gluing everything together, is that you're going to have a whole bunch of small imbalances within all of the sequences, and that is going to be fixed a little bit by this glue compression, by this gluing process. So yes, maybe over here it is a little bit erratic and maybe it's a little bit sporadic the way that the sequences are playing, and maybe this is a little bit too quiet in comparison to this stuff over here, and maybe I need to separate stuff a little bit more over here, and maybe I need to make a little bit of extra space over here. And all of that stuff I could technically fix in all of the individual elements, but I can also just go into the group and say, slam a glue compressor on there and have the glue compressor kind of do that for me. Of course, to a certain extent, I'm not going to sit here and say that you can just slap a glue compressor on a whole group of different elements and the glue compressor is going to do your mix for you. I'm just going to say that these small imbalances, these small indifferences kind of get smoothed out a little bit by this glue compression process. So when it comes to buses, when it comes to folders, when it comes to groups, however you want to call them, what it really ends up being is it ends up being just an organizational tool for yourself to basically take the whole mix, take all of the files that you have and kind of compartmentalize them into different parts and then treat those as individual elements. If you get the mix between the elements right, then you can just call it one element and then you just have to mix that element with all of the rest of the track. And you can kind of treat it as if it was just one track, as if there was literally just a sequence track which just holds all of the sequences already pre-mixed. And then you just move on to the next stuff, and then you don't really have to worry about the sequences anymore. Of course, for the sequences, it's not really like that. It's more, as I said, for these individual groups where it's really the case where you could just collapse this and literally treat it as one individual element. But that is basically how I want you to think about these buses and these groups and all of these kind of things. It is just going to be an organizational tool for you to make the mix and turn it into smaller and smaller problems so that you can then figure out those individual small problems. And if you have done that X many times for however many tracks that you have, then you have a finished mix. And then you don't need me anymore to tell you what to do. So anyway, that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is to do so financially, which you can do over on my Patreon page or by becoming a YouTube member. There's a whole bunch of benefits to both of those, so thank you if you do that, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.